Marcus Thompson adjusted his worn leather messenger bag as he stepped onto the crowded metro train, heading to his sister's engagement party in downtown Chicago. The bag had been his father's, a gift from his grandmother before she passed away 10 years ago. Despite its frayed edges and faded color, Marcus treasured it more than any expensive accessory he could afford. His sister Jessica and their cousin Amanda were already seated near the window, dressed in designer outfits that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month as a community college instructor. Jessica's eyes immediately locked onto his bag as he approached, her perfectly manicured eyebrows raising in what he recognized as her signature look of disapproval. "Marcus, seriously, you're carrying that old thing to my engagement party." Jessica's voice carried that familiar tone of embarrassment mixed with superiority that had followed him throughout their childhood. "Do you know how many important people will be there tonight? My fiancé's family owns 3 restaurants downtown." Amanda giggled behind her hand, her diamond bracelet catching the fluorescent train lights. "Oh my God, Jess, is that the same bag he had in college? That thing looks like it survived a war zone." She leaned closer to Jessica, not bothering to lower her voice. "Couldn't he at least buy something decent for once? It's so cheap looking." Marcus felt his face flush with a mixture of anger and humiliation. The bag represented everything his family had worked for: his father's years as a factory worker, his grandmother's careful savings to buy something that would last. To them, it was a symbol of their financial struggles. To him, it was a connection to the people who had sacrificed everything for his education. "It has sentimental value," Marcus said quietly, settling into a seat across from them. "Dad carried this to work every day for 15 years." Jessica rolled her eyes dramatically. "That's exactly the problem, Marcus. You're stuck in the past. Look at Amanda and me. We understand the importance of presentation. Image matters in the real world." An elderly woman sitting nearby had been listening to the conversation, her weathered hands folded over a beautiful cream-colored leather handbag. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant bun, and her clothes, while simple, were clearly well made. She wore a small gold pin on her lapel that read "Educator of the Year 1987." The woman's eyes met Marcus's for a moment, and he saw something in her expression that looked like understanding. She had been observing the entire exchange, her face growing more thoughtful with each cruel comment from Jessica and Amanda. As the train pulled into the next station, Marcus prepared himself for another hour of enduring his sister's criticism. He had hoped that as they grew older, Jessica would mature beyond her teenage obsession with status symbols. Instead, she seemed to have doubled down on her belief that a person's worth was measured by their possessions. The woman continued to watch the interaction unfold, her expression shifting from curiosity to something that looked remarkably like determination. The train lurched forward as more passengers filed on at the busy downtown station. Marcus tried to focus on the cityscape rushing past the windows, but Jessica and Amanda weren't finished with their commentary about his appearance. Honestly, Marcus, I don't understand why you insist on living like you're still in college, Jessica continued, her voice growing louder as if she wanted the entire train car to hear. You have a job now. You could afford nice things if you actually tried. Amanda nodded enthusiastically, her perfectly styled blonde hair bouncing with each gesture. My brother works at the same college, and he says the professors there make decent money. There's really no excuse for looking so. She paused, searching for the right word, unprofessional. Marcus gripped the handle of his bag tighter, feeling the familiar comfort of the worn leather beneath his fingers. His father had carried this bag through rain and snow, to parent-teacher conferences and Marcus's college graduation. It had been there for every important moment in their family's life. Maybe if you spent less money on those expensive textbooks and more on your appearance, you'd actually get promoted, Jessica added with a laugh that sounded more like a bark. Perception is reality, Marcus. You look like someone who shops at thrift stores. I do shop at thrift stores, Marcus replied evenly, though his jaw was clenched. There's nothing wrong with that. This sent both women into fits of laughter that drew annoyed glances from other passengers. The elderly woman who had been watching them earlier shifted in her seat, her expression darkening with each passing moment. That explains so much, Amanda gasped between giggles. No wonder you always look like you're wearing costumes instead of clothes. Do you even own anything that wasn't previously owned by someone else? Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment. It was true that most of his wardrobe came from second-hand stores, but not because he was cheap or lazy. He sent money to his mother every month to help with her medical bills, and he was slowly paying off his student loans. Every dollar he spent on himself was a dollar he couldn't use to help his family. The elderly woman stood up suddenly, her cream-colored handbag clutched firmly in her hands. She walked over to where the three of them were sitting, her posture straight and dignified despite her obvious age. "Excuse me," she said in a clear, strong voice that commanded immediate attention. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation." Jessica and Amanda looked up at her with barely concealed annoyance, clearly upset that their entertainment had been interrupted by a stranger. "I'm sorry, but this is a private family discussion," Jessica said dismissively, waving her hand as if to shoo the woman away. The elderly woman smiled, but there was steel in her eyes. "Actually, dear, when you're speaking loudly enough for half the train car to hear, it becomes a public discussion." The elderly woman's presence seemed to fill the space around them, commanding attention in a way that made both Jessica and Amanda suddenly uncomfortable. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades dealing with difficult people, and her calm demeanor only made her words more impactful. "Young man," she said, turning to Marcus with a warm smile, "may I see your bag for a moment?" Marcus hesitated, confused by the strange request, but something in the woman's kind eyes made him trust her. He carefully handed over his father's messenger bag, watching as she examined it with the careful attention of someone who understood craftsmanship. "This is beautiful work," she said, running her fingers along the leather. "Hand-stitched, full-grain leather, probably made in the 1970s. This would cost over $300 to buy new today if you could even find someone with the skill to make it." Jessica and Amanda exchanged glances, their confident smirks beginning to fade as the woman continued her examination. "See this patina," the woman continued, pointing to the rich golden brown color that had developed over years of use. "This only comes from decades of careful use and proper maintenance. You can't buy this kind of character in a store." She turned to face Jessica and Amanda directly, her expression growing more serious. "I've been teaching for over 40 years, and I've learned to recognize quality when I see it. This bag represents something far more valuable than anything you could purchase with a credit card." Amanda shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "It's just old," she muttered, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Yes, it is old," the woman agreed. "Old enough to tell a story, old enough to represent a lifetime of hard work and dedication, old enough to be passed down from father to son as a symbol of love and sacrifice." Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat as the woman's words validated everything he had been feeling but couldn't express. "I carried a bag very similar to this one when I started teaching in 1965. The woman continued. "My students used to tease me about it, just like you're teasing your brother. But that bag saw me through my entire career, through budget cuts and difficult students, through late nights grading papers and early mornings preparing lessons." She paused, her eyes taking on a distant look. "When I finally retired, I had offers from the district to buy me a new bag as a retirement gift, something expensive and modern. But I kept my old one because it represented every challenge I had overcome, every student I had helped, every small victory that made the difficult days worthwhile." The train car had grown noticeably quieter, with several passengers now openly listening to the conversation. Jessica seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere, her earlier confidence crumbling under the weight of the woman's words and the disapproving stares of the other passengers. "Now," the woman said, her voice taking on a tone that brooked no argument, I want you to apologize to your brother for your cruel words." Jessica's face flushed red as she realized that several passengers were now watching the interaction with obvious interest. The elderly woman's words had transformed the atmosphere in the train car, turning what had been a private family humiliation into a public lesson in decency and respect. "I don't think you understand the situation," Jessica said, her voice defensive but noticeably quieter than before. "This is between me and my brother. We're family." The elderly woman raised an eyebrow, her expression growing stern in a way that reminded Marcus of his favorite high school teacher. "Family is exactly why this matters so much, dear. Family should be the people who support you, not tear you down in public." Amanda tried to come to Jessica's defense, but her usual confidence was clearly shaken. "We were just trying to help him understand that appearance matters. In the professional world, you have to make a good impression." "And what impression do you think you're making right now?" the woman asked pointedly. "What do you think these people think of two young women who would mock their brother's possessions in public?" Marcus watched as both women looked around the train car, finally noticing the disapproving stares and shaking heads of their fellow passengers. A businessman in an expensive suit was looking at them with obvious disgust, while a young mother had pulled her children closer, as if to protect them from witnessing such cruelty. "There's a difference between constructive advice and public humiliation," the woman continued. "Your brother isn't showing disrespect to your family by carrying this bag. You're showing disrespect to your family by treating him this way." The woman then did something that surprised everyone in the train car, including Marcus. She opened her own cream-colored handbag and began removing items from it: a wallet, reading glasses, a small packet of tissues, and a few other personal belongings. "What are you doing?" Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm giving your brother my bag," the woman said matter-of-factly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Clearly, you believe that expensive accessories are more important than sentimental value. So let's see how you react when he has something that meets your standards." Marcus started to protest, but the woman held up her hand to stop him. "This bag cost me $200 when I bought it last month. It's genuine leather, brand new, and it should meet even the highest standards for your sister's engagement party." She finished transferring her belongings to a small cloth bag she pulled from her purse, then held out the cream-colored handbag to Marcus. "But I want you to understand something, young man. This bag is beautiful and it's expensive, but it doesn't have a single memory attached to it. It doesn't represent love, sacrifice, or family history. It's just a bag." The train car was now completely silent except for the rhythmic clicking of the wheels on the tracks. Marcus stared at the offered bag, understanding the weight of the gesture, but feeling conflicted about accepting such a generous gift from a stranger. "Take it," the woman insisted gently. "Not because your sister is right about appearances, but because sometimes we need to see the difference between what has value and what is valuable." Marcus stared at the cream-colored handbag in the woman's outstretched hands, feeling the weight of the moment. The entire train car seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Jessica and Amanda sat frozen in their seats, their earlier confidence completely evaporated under the collective gaze of the other passengers. "I can't accept this," Marcus said quietly, though his voice carried clearly in the silent car. "This is too generous, and I don't even know your name." The elderly woman smiled warmly. "My name is Margaret Williams, and I'm a retired high school English teacher. I spent 43 years trying to teach young people about the difference between surface appearances and true character. Consider this my final lesson." She pressed the bag into Marcus's hands before he could protest further. "Besides, I have a feeling this bag will serve a greater purpose with you than it ever could with me." Jessica finally found her voice, though it came out as a stammered whisper. This is ridiculous. You don't understand our family dynamic. Marcus has always been stubborn about these things." Margaret turned to Jessica with the kind of look that had probably terrified countless students over the decades. "What I understand, young lady, is that you've just learned a very public lesson about the consequences of cruelty. Your brother now has exactly what you claimed he needed, an expensive, professional-looking bag. But notice how that doesn't change anything about who he is or what kind of person he is." Amanda tried to sink deeper into her seat, clearly wishing she could disappear entirely. Several passengers were now openly talking among themselves, their whispered comments clearly not favorable toward the two women. "The question now," Margaret continued, "is whether you've learned anything from this experience, or whether you'll continue to judge people based on their possessions rather than their character." Marcus looked down at the beautiful bag in his hands, then at his father's worn messenger bag that Margaret had placed carefully on the seat beside him. The contrast was stark, one brand new and perfect, the other weathered and full of history. "Mrs. Williams," he said, his voice stronger now, "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I think I need to make something clear to my sister myself." He stood up, holding both bags, and turned to face Jessica directly. "You're right that appearances matter in the professional world, but you're wrong about what kind of appearance matters most." The train began to slow as it approached the next station, and Marcus could see that several passengers were preparing to get off, though many seemed reluctant to leave before the drama concluded. "I teach at a community college," Marcus continued, his voice calm but firm. "My students come from all kinds of backgrounds. Some wear designer clothes, some shop at thrift stores, some can barely afford clothes at all. But you know what I've learned? The students who succeed aren't the ones with the most expensive possessions. They're the ones who work hard, show respect for others, and understand that true value comes from character, not from labels. He held up his father's bag. This bag represents everything I value: family, hard work, perseverance, and love. If you can't see the beauty in that, then maybe the problem isn't with my appearance. The train lurched to a stop at the downtown station, and Marcus realized this was where he needed to get off for Jessica's engagement party. The timing felt almost poetic. He would be leaving this moment of revelation and walking directly into the event that had started this entire confrontation. Margaret Williams gathered her small cloth bag and prepared to stand. "This is my stop as well," she said with a smile. "I'm meeting my daughter for dinner downtown." Jessica and Amanda remained seated, both looking uncomfortable and uncertain about how to respond to Marcus's words. The other passengers who were getting off at this station filed past them, and Marcus noticed that several people gave approving nods in his direction while casting disapproving glances at his sister. As they stepped onto the platform, Margaret turned to Marcus one more time. "I want you to know something, young man. In all my years of teaching, I've met thousands of students and their families. I can usually tell within the first few minutes of meeting someone whether they have good character or not." She paused, adjusting her small bag on her shoulder. "Your sister and cousin are young, and hopefully they'll learn from this experience. But you already understand what matters most in life. Don't let anyone convince you to change that." Marcus felt emotional as he looked down at the expensive bag in his hands, then at his father's messenger bag. "Mrs. Williams, I want to give this back to you. What you did on that train was incredible, but I can't accept such an expensive gift." Margaret shook her head firmly. "I told you, that bag will serve a greater purpose with you, but I'm not asking you to use it tonight. I'm asking you to keep it as a reminder of this moment, a reminder that you should never be ashamed of who you are or where you come from." She reached into her small cloth bag and pulled out a business card. "This has my phone number on it. When you're ready to return the bag, call me. But I suspect that won't be for quite some time." As Margaret walked away into the crowd of commuters, Marcus stood on the platform holding both bags and feeling like his entire perspective had shifted. He looked back at the train, where he could see Jessica and Amanda still sitting in their seats, probably dreading the moment they would have to get off and face him again. The engagement party was in 30 minutes, and Marcus knew he had a choice to make. He could show up with the expensive bag, proving to Jessica and her fiancé's family that he could meet their standards of appearance. Or he could walk in with his father's bag, carrying the lesson he had just learned about the difference between surface appearances and true worth. He thought about his students, many of whom struggled with the same kinds of judgments that Jessica had just demonstrated. He thought about his father, who had worked double shifts to pay for Marcus's education while carrying that worn leather bag. He thought about Margaret Williams, who had spent her career teaching young people about character and integrity. The decision, when it came, felt inevitable and right. Marcus walked into the upscale restaurant where Jessica's engagement party was being held, his father's messenger bag slung confidently over his shoulder. The expensive cream-colored bag that Margaret had given him was safely tucked away in his car, saved for a future conversation with the remarkable woman who had defended him. The restaurant was exactly what he had expected: gleaming surfaces, soft lighting, and the kind of hushed atmosphere that seemed to suggest every conversation was of utmost importance. Jessica's fiancé, Robert, had clearly spared no expense for this celebration of their upcoming wedding. Marcus spotted his sister near the bar, still wearing the same designer outfit from the train, but now looking significantly less confident than she had an hour earlier. She was talking to a group of well-dressed people who Marcus assumed were Robert's family and friends. When she saw him approaching, her expression shifted through several emotions: embarrassment, anxiety, and something that might have been regret. "Marcus," Robert approached with his characteristic enthusiastic smile, arms outstretched for a hug. "I'm so glad you could make it. Jessica was worried you might not show up." Marcus accepted the hug, noting how Robert's eyes briefly glanced at his bag but showed no signs of judgment or disapproval. It was a small thing, but it reminded Marcus that not everyone shared Jessica's obsession with superficial appearances. "Wouldn't miss it," Marcus replied genuinely. "Congratulations on the engagement. Jessica's lucky to have found someone who makes her so happy." As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself in conversations with various guests, and he began to notice something interesting. The people who seemed most focused on appearances and status were also the ones who had the least interesting things to say. They talked about brands, restaurants, vacation destinations, and other people's possessions. But the conversations that Marcus found most engaging were with people who asked about his work, his interests, and his thoughts on various topics. He met Robert's uncle, a successful businessman who had started his company from nothing and still carried a briefcase that was clearly decades old. He talked with Jessica's college roommate, who had become a social worker, and spoke passionately about the families she worked with. He had a fascinating conversation with an elderly couple who had been married for 50 years and had traveled the world together on a teacher's salary. None of these people commented on his bag, his clothes, or his appearance. They were interested in who he was, not what he owned. About halfway through the party, Marcus noticed Amanda standing alone near the windows, looking uncomfortable and out of place. She had been quiet since arriving, clearly still affected by the encounter on the train. Marcus walked over to her, surprising himself with his decision to extend an olive branch. "How are you doing, Amanda?" he asked simply. She looked up at him with eyes that showed genuine remorse. "I've been thinking about what happened on the train," she said quietly. "That woman was right, wasn't she? We were being cruel." Marcus nodded. "Yeah, you were, but I appreciate you acknowledging it." Amanda took a deep breath. "I want you to know that I don't actually think there's anything wrong with shopping at thrift stores or carrying an old bag. I think. I think sometimes I say things because I'm insecure about my own stuff." It was the most honest thing Marcus had ever heard Amanda say, and it gave him hope that the lesson from the train might have lasting impact. As the evening wound down, Marcus found himself standing on the restaurant's outdoor terrace with Robert, looking out over the city lights. The party had been successful by any measure: good food, good wine, and the kind of networking opportunities that Jessica valued so highly. "Can I ask you something?" Robert said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Jessica seemed really tense when you first arrived tonight. Did something happen?" Marcus considered how much to share, ultimately deciding that honesty was the best approach. He told Robert about the encounter on the train, about Margaret Williams, and about the choice he had made to carry his father's bag to the party. Robert listened without interruption, his expression growing more thoughtful as the story unfolded. When Marcus finished, Robert was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry that happened," Robert said finally. "Jessica can be intense about certain things. I've been trying to help her understand that not everyone has the same priorities she does." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I grew up with money, but my parents made sure I understood the value of hard work and respect for others. When I met Jessica, I was attracted to her ambition and her drive to succeed. But sometimes I worry that she's forgotten that success isn't just about accumulating things." Marcus felt a wave of sympathy for Robert. It couldn't be easy to love someone while also trying to help them become a better person. "The thing is," Robert continued, "I think Jessica acts the way she does because she's afraid. She grew up feeling like your family didn't have enough, and now she's overcompensating by trying to prove that she's made it." It was an insight that Marcus hadn't considered before, but it made sense. Jessica's behavior had become more extreme as she had become more financially successful, as if she was trying to distance herself from their humble origins. "That woman on the train sounds like she was remarkable," Robert said. "I wish I could have met her." Marcus smiled, thinking of Margaret Williams and her quiet dignity. "She was. She taught me something important about the difference between being ashamed of where you come from and being proud of where you're going. As they prepared to go back inside, Robert put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "For what it's worth, I think your bag is perfect. It tells a story, and that's worth more than anything you could buy in a store." Inside, Marcus found Jessica sitting alone at a table, looking tired and thoughtful. The restaurant was nearly empty now, with most of the guests having departed. Marcus walked over and sat down across from her. "A good party," he said simply. Jessica looked up at him, and for the first time that evening her expression was completely unguarded. "Marcus, I owe you an apology." "Yeah, you do," Marcus agreed, but his tone was gentle rather than accusatory. "I've been thinking about what that woman said on the train and about how I must have looked to all those people." Jessica's voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. "I was embarrassed, but not for the reasons you might think." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I was embarrassed because I realized that I've become the kind of person I used to hate when we were kids. Remember how we used to make fun of the rich kids at school who acted like they were better than everyone else?" Marcus nodded, remembering their shared resentment of classmates who had flaunted their family's wealth. Jessica continued, her voice growing stronger as she found the words she had been searching for all evening. "Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that if I could just accumulate enough nice things, I would finally feel secure. But tonight, watching how people responded to you versus how they responded to me, I realized that I've been focusing on all the wrong things." Marcus reached across the table and squeezed his sister's hand. "Jess, you don't have to completely change who you are. You've worked hard for everything you have, and you deserve to enjoy it. But you also don't have to tear other people down to build yourself up." "I know," Jessica said, tears forming in her eyes. "And I especially shouldn't do that to you. You're my brother and you've always been there for me, even when I was being horrible to you." The restaurant was closing around them, but neither sibling seemed eager to end this conversation. It felt like the first real talk they had had in years. "Can I tell you something?" Jessica asked. "When I saw you walk in here tonight with Dad's bag, I was actually proud of you. All evening, people kept asking me about my brother, the college professor, and I realized that they were impressed by what you do, not by what you own." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest. "That means a lot, Jess, more than you know." "I want to do better," Jessica said firmly. "I want to be the kind of person that woman on the train would be proud to know, and I want to be the kind of sister you deserve." As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Jessica had one more surprise for Marcus. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped package. "I bought this for you weeks ago," she said, looking slightly embarrassed. It's an expensive leather conditioner and restoration kit. I was going to give it to you tonight as a not-so-subtle hint that you should take better care of your appearance. Marcus unwrapped the package and found a professional-grade leather care kit that probably cost more than he spent on groceries in a month. But now I realize, Jessica continued, that I should have given it to you as a way to help you preserve something that means so much to you. Dad's bag is beautiful, Marcus. It deserves to be maintained and cared for so it can last for many more years. It was a small gesture, but it represented a fundamental shift in Jessica's thinking. Instead of trying to change Marcus, she was now trying to support him in being who he was. As they walked out of the restaurant together, Marcus felt lighter than he had in months. The evening had started with humiliation and anger, but it was ending with understanding and reconciliation. "Jess," he said as they reached the street, "I want you to know that I'm proud of you too. You've accomplished amazing things and you should be proud of your success. Just don't let it change who you are at your core." Jessica smiled, and for the first time that evening it was completely genuine. "Deal, but I have one condition." "What's that?" "Next time we're on a train together, you have to promise to tell me if I'm being awful to someone. I never want to be that person again." Marcus laughed, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in hours. "Deal." 3 weeks later, Marcus was grading papers in his small office at the community college when his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but something about it seemed familiar. "Hello, Marcus. This is Margaret Williams. We met on the train a few weeks ago." Marcus immediately set down his red pen and gave the call his full attention. "Mrs. Williams, how are you? I've been thinking about you." "I'm well, thank you. I was calling because I wanted to check on you. How did the engagement party go?" Marcus told her about the evening, about his decision to carry his father's bag, about the conversations with Robert and Amanda, and especially about his reconciliation with Jessica. Margaret listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of approval or encouragement. "I'm so proud of you," she said when he finished. "You made exactly the right choice. How do you feel about everything that happened?" "Honestly, it was one of the most important evenings of my life," Marcus replied. "Not just because of the party, but because of what you taught me on that train. You showed me that standing up for what you believe in doesn't have to mean being confrontational or angry. Sometimes it just means being confident in who you are." Margaret chuckled softly. "That's a lesson that took me many years to learn myself. I'm glad I could pass it along." "Mrs. Williams, I still have your bag. I've been meaning to call you about returning it." "Actually, that's part of why I'm calling. I have a proposition for you." Marcus leaned back in his chair, curious about what she might have in mind. I've been thinking about our conversation on the train and about the work you do with community college students. I imagine many of them face the same kinds of judgments that you experienced with your sister. They do, Marcus confirmed. Some of my students are embarrassed about their circumstances, their clothes, their possessions. They think they don't belong in college because they don't look like the students at more expensive schools. I thought so, Margaret said. I have an idea. What if we use this experience to help them? She explained her proposal. She wanted to visit Marcus's classes to talk to students about self-worth, confidence, and the difference between surface appearances and true value. She had been a teacher for over 40 years, and retirement had left her missing the opportunity to make a difference in young people's lives. I think hearing from someone like you would be incredibly valuable for my students, Marcus said, already imagining how Margaret's wisdom could impact the young people he worked with every day. There's one more thing, Margaret added. I want you to keep the bag. Mrs. Williams, I can't. Let me finish, she interrupted gently. I want you to keep it as a reminder of this lesson, but more importantly, I want you to use it as a teaching tool. Bring both bags to class, your father's and mine. Let your students see the difference between something that has sentimental value and something that has monetary value. Help them understand that both can be beautiful in their own way. Marcus was quiet for a moment, overwhelmed by the generosity and wisdom of this remarkable woman. I would be honored to work with you, he said finally, and I think my students would be lucky to learn from you. Wonderful. I'll call you next week to set up a time to visit your classes. As Marcus hung up the phone, he looked at both bags sitting in the corner of his office. His father's worn messenger bag and Margaret's elegant cream-colored handbag, side by side, representing different kinds of value but both beautiful in their own way. He thought about his students and the lessons they might learn from this story. He thought about Jessica, who had called him twice since the engagement party to ask for his advice on various matters. He thought about the power of standing up for what you believe in, even in small moments that might seem insignificant. Most of all, he thought about the unexpected ways that life could change direction in a single conversation with a stranger on a train. 2 months later, Marcus stood in front of his introduction to literature class, holding both bags and preparing to tell his students about one of the most important lessons he had ever learned. The classroom was full of young people from diverse backgrounds, some dressed in designer clothes, others in thrift store finds, all of them working hard to build better lives for themselves. Margaret Williams sat in the back of the room, having arrived early to observe the class before her guest lecture. She had visited Marcus's classes several times over the past month, and each time she had been impressed by the thoughtfulness and resilience of the students. Today I want to talk to you about value, Marcus began, holding up his father's messenger bag. Not the kind of value you can find on a price tag, but the kind of value that comes from meaning, from history, from love. He told them the story of the train ride, of Jessica's cruel comments, of Margaret's intervention, and of the choice he had made at the engagement party. As he spoke, he watched his students' faces, seeing recognition and understanding in their expressions. How many of you have ever felt embarrassed about something you owned? Marcus asked. How many of you have ever felt like you didn't belong somewhere because of what you were wearing or carrying? Nearly every hand in the room went up. Here's what I learned, Marcus continued, now holding up Margaret's cream-colored bag alongside his father's worn leather one. These bags are both beautiful, but they're beautiful for different reasons. One represents craftsmanship and tradition and family history. The other represents generosity and kindness, and the power of standing up for what's right. A student in the front row raised her hand. Professor Thompson, did your sister ever apologize for what she said? Marcus smiled. She did, and more importantly, she learned from the experience. She's actually here today. She asked if she could come listen to Mrs. Williams's lecture. He gestured toward the back of the room, where Jessica sat next to Margaret. She had taken time off work to attend, wanting to hear the full story and to meet the woman who had taught her brother such an important lesson. The point isn't that expensive things are bad or that old things are good, Marcus explained. The point is that the value of something, whether it's a bag, a piece of clothing, or a person, isn't determined by its price tag. It's determined by the story it tells, the purpose it serves, and the love it represents. Margaret Williams stood up from her seat in the back of the room. "If I may add something," she said, her voice carrying the authority of decades of teaching experience. "When I was your age," she continued, walking to the front of the classroom, "I thought success meant having the right things, wearing the right clothes, impressing the right people. It took me years to learn that the most successful people I knew were the ones who were comfortable with themselves, regardless of what they owned." She paused, looking around the room at the young faces watching her intently. "You are all here because you believe in the power of education to change your lives. You're working hard, making sacrifices, investing in your futures. Don't let anyone convince you that you're not good enough because you don't have the most expensive possessions. Your worth isn't measured by what you own, it's measured by who you are and what you do with the opportunities you're given." The classroom was completely silent, with students hanging on every word. "Now," Margaret continued with a smile, "let's talk about how to carry yourselves with confidence in any situation, regardless of what you're wearing or carrying." For the next hour, Marcus watched as Margaret Williams worked her magic, teaching his students about self-respect, dignity, and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing your own worth. It was a masterclass in character and resilience, delivered by someone who had spent her life helping young people become their best selves.